Aloha, Mililani. All right, thank you. I'm Mike Webb. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for Civil Beat, and thank you all very much for coming out tonight. This is our Education Civil Cafe, and it's the third in a series that we're doing about how to improve education in Hawaii. So this one is going to focus on the professional development of teachers and what we can do to retain them and make them as good as they can possibly be. Before we start, I just want to say a couple of words about Civil Beat. If you're not familiar with us, we are an investigative news site where you can access us at civilbeat.com. And we are focused on accountability. We want to hold the people in power and our leaders accountable for the actions they do. And ultimately, we hope the work that we do will lead to some changes to improve Hawaii and make it better. So we have a special offer over at the table there. It's $4.99 a month. So please pick up one of those and check us out, and hopefully you'll subscribe. So for tonight's panel, I'm going to introduce everyone. Nathan Eagle is the Civil Beat reporter and moderator for tonight's discussion. Next is Lisa DeLong. She is one of the educational sponsors on the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, and she is also the principal of Kailua Intermediate School. She served as a special education teacher, technology coordinator, school administrator, and complex areas superintendent, so we're glad to have her with us. Next is William Scott. He is a former professor at the University of Hawaii, among other places, and he is currently the managing director of teacher leadership development for Teach for America. Next is Senator Michelle, Senator Michelle Kadani. She is the State Senate's new chairman of the Education Committee, and she's been involved in public service for much of her career, and we're very pleased that she was able to move her plans around to make it here with us today. And then we have Michelle Robillard. She is a late replacement for Carrie Shimamoto of the New Teacher Center. Michelle has been a teacher mentor and has extensive experience with professional development of teachers, so we're glad to have her. And then last but not least is Corey Rosenlee. He is a social studies teacher at Campbell High School in Eva Beach. He's a very vocal and passionate teacher, and in fact, he wrote to me the day that we announced the event, and he asked me, how can you have a panel about teacher development and not have a teacher on the panel? So I invited him to join us. So we're really glad to have him on board. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge our sponsors for the night. I'd like to thank Kathy Bryant of the He'e Coalition, Don Young of the University of Hawaii College of Education, and Lynn Hammonds with the Hawaii Teacher Standard Board. And with that, I'm going to give it to Nathan, and let's begin.
Thanks for the introductions, Mike, and thank you all of the panelists for being here and taking time this evening, as well as all of you. I wanted to open it up this evening before we start talking about what kind of solutions we might try to work out, just talking a little bit about how each of you, from your unique perspectives, views the issue of teacher retention in Hawaii. We can just start closest to me on my right here.
I can use this
Whatever's more convenient.
Thank you. Well, in preparation for this question, we knew it was going to come up. I asked about 10 teachers at our school what was most important to them. And of course, providing an environment that treats teachers like professionals and giving them some autonomy. Although we have Common Core standards in place, they still like to have some autonomy over what they're going to teach and how they're going to teach it. So they appreciated that. And it's interesting because we read about Daniel Pink, who says that money really doesn't make a difference. But when I think that the cost of living is just not tenable for teachers, then money does become the issue. And just about every single one mentioned pay as a need. They want to be able to live and work and raise their families in Hawaii, and they would like to be able to live close to the school that they teach, where they teach, and they're not able to do that. And we do see just a trend where as soon as teachers have a young family, they tend to move to a place where they can afford to live and buy a home. And home ownership, as we know, is really, they're just really outpriced right now. So that came up. It came up over and over and over with each teacher that I talked to, is pay.
Will Scott, I would echo the pay. But I would say it's part of a much larger set of issues. And so I definitely agree that the teacher pay for starting teachers is very challenging, and they don't necessarily see a path forward. Some other things I think about when I think about teacher retention are leadership. Many of our greatest teachers start off very strong in the profession, and I think providing them an avenue to become teacher leaders, leaders in other kinds in the educational sector, and seeing a clear pathway towards that, I think is one of the things that I hear when people are leaving. And some of them are leaving to go into other education ventures in other states, and so they're not necessarily leaving the education sector, but they're leaving our home. So I would say those things. I think that the third thing that is often, that's often the most important thing, though, are the relationships at the school site. And I think the single biggest thing that I've found that keeps teachers staying is when a principal asks them to stay. And I think that's a sign of a larger set of issues, which is a set of feeling valued, feeling like your work is of value and use to the community.
Aloha. I too also believe that the teacher salaries, play a big part of it. If you look at the teachers that we are getting into the system now, within 5 years we lose about 54%. And that tells me that they are not happy, not just with the pay, but with the system itself. If you think about it, many of the new teachers that start out are probably Gen Y and Generation X teachers within that time frame. So most new teachers born, in 1981 or later would be in the 35 years old or younger, fall under the Generation Y millennium, and they're realistic thinkers. They value diversity and change. They have been involved in their communities, probably their entire lives, and they want to work. They want their work to be meaningful. The Generation X group, the 35 to 50 years, born between the years 65 and 80, they're somewhat skeptics, but they need a balance between their work and their personal lives. They're flexible and they're motivated, and they want to build a career that's portable. When you look at these and you look at these characteristics, they're perfect descriptions of what teachers should be, but yet they're not staying in our system. So there are issues, and it just is not with pay. It is with leadership, as Will said. And I hope that in the next few years, more of us can work together. I've been to meetings with Hey Coalition with Kathy, and I see the groups like Daryl Galera and Randy Roth with the empowerment issues. But I do see that they're willing to work together, and I would love to see that continue, to get the teachers union together and see how we can make it better and more attractive so that we retain the teachers. It's hard enough getting them to want to be teachers, but when you lose 54%, that's not saying much for the system that we have. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Michelle Roblard, and I'm the program director at NTC Hawaii. I would like to acknowledge everything that everyone said, and for sure I was a teacher for 10 years, and the pay definitely is something that, it's a hard job. If you've ever done it, teaching is a hard job. But the one thing also is not only would teachers love to get paid more, but I think when you look at research and just talk to teachers, is another thing that happens is they want to be in a culture that they feel empowered, and that they feel the leadership opportunities that Will talked about. Also, especially in new teachers, a lot of retention happens within the first 5 years. And so with new teachers, a lot of things that happen are they want to be supported. And so with the New Teacher Center organization, what we do is we intensively support beginning teachers in their first 2 years to get them to be autonomous, to get them to build those habits of mind so that they stay longer than 5 years, which is super important. So I acknowledge everything, and the salary is important, but I think it's really important to also build that culture. And it's not just in the school, it's in the state, and it's in the complex areas. And then also making sure that we're offering the professional development, but not just professional development, that we're also supporting teachers to help them with the implementation of all of the initiatives and all the professional development with curriculum that we're providing teachers, so that they know how to make that work in the classroom with the students that they're working with every single day, day in and day out. So that would be my answer.
When you factor in cost of living, Hawaii teachers are the worst paid in the nation. And oftentimes people say, well, that's just the price of paradise. But that's not the case. If you look at other districts across the United States that have high cost of living, they can pay their teachers 60 to 90% better than teachers are in Hawaii. You know, a beginning teacher in Hawaii can make in the 30s, okay? And that's just not sustainable. And it's not just the pay. You know, at Campbell High School, we had classrooms this year that got into 100 degrees. You put 40 kids in a 100-degree room, make them the worst paid in the nation, and I'm surprised that we don't have more teachers leave. You know, we cannot at this pace even find teachers to replace the ones that are leaving. In 2011, 70% of all new teachers hired in Hawaii were emergency hires. This year at Campbell High School, we started off the year missing 3 English teachers. There was no one that applied for the position, and they had to find someone else to fill it. I've counted, there have been 94 new teachers hired at Campbell in the last 3 years. You know, I think at some point we have to ask our state and look at a reflection to ask ourselves, why do we allow this to occur? Are we okay with that? And this high turnover rate happens in our highest poverty schools. The schools that most need qualified teachers are the ones that are most likely to get inexperience in new teachers. You know, so I think one of the big questions that we need to ask today when doing this is, both as the panel and as a state, what are we going to do to change this problem?
Thanks, Gordon. Thank you all for the insight. Let's build on that. Let's start. Lisa, you had a comment.
So I just had a follow-up. So it doesn't only have to come in terms of pay for salary for a teacher. There are lots of other ways to incentivize teaching. So one example might be to help with a mortgage, or if a new developer is coming in and building a community and there'll be a school nearby, maybe there'll be discounted housing for teachers. Or maybe when teachers make their mortgage payments, it's not taxed. I mean, there's lots of other ways to support teachers to own homes. But really that was the issue that I heard is home ownership is just really difficult right now for teachers, or even apartment ownership.
That's a good point. And I think this is an issue, and of course, not just with teaching, but everywhere. You know, every profession is dealing with this cost of living issue. But you raise a great point that it doesn't necessarily have to just be upping the wages. You know, you can do outside of the box. I remember even in journalism, when I was at the Aspen Times, very, very briefly, but they had a program where they had subsidized housing. They couldn't afford to pay the reporters more, but they could afford to give basically half rent. So yeah, that's great. Let's build on the cost of living a little bit more. I mean, what kind of other things or programs can the state, meaning whether it's Department of Education, the legislature, the governor's office, what kind of things can be done? Maybe Senator Kadani, are there some things the legislature might look at next session?
Yes, we are looking, getting ready to start our session on January 21st, next week, Wednesday. And there have been many bills in the past that have dealt with whether it's teacher salaries, tax waivers, etc., that have been introduced, have not made it all the way through the House and Senate committees. But it doesn't mean we stop trying. I think there's a couple bills that I am looking to introduce again this year. One is the teacher's tax credit, and trying to look at how we can match maybe what the federal does, and that really doesn't go very far, and it's a small place to start, but it's a start. There are other bills that we need to look at, and I don't have all the answers, so if you guys have ideas, please feel free to share them with me before the deadline to introduce bills. And I'm looking and reviewing bills that have come before us in the past to see what kind of value they may have for our teachers. And I would like to say that one of my priorities this year is really to focus on teachers, how we retain them, how we can encourage them to be teachers, and give them the empowerment they need and want in the classrooms, but also to provide the resources. I mean, the size of the classrooms is an issue for many also, so we need to look at that. Thank you.
I think that goes towards working conditions. Speaking very briefly with Michelle, but I read a column from the CEO of New Teacher Center just recently, and she was talking about how working conditions are it's critical to improve that. It's pay, but it's also programs that help make teachers feel valued and improve their careers, whether it's coming from principals or administrators or others. But I was wondering if you might be able to shed a little light on what kind of programs you're working on now and implementing that have found success.
Sure. So what we do at NTC Hawaii is we support beginning teachers in their first 2 years, and also a third-year pathway. Another thing that we're also doing is, because Hawaii has rolled out a lot of new initiatives, one of the things being the evaluation system, is we've also put into complex areas supporting struggling veteran teachers, meaning when they're identified with an area of focus, what do you do? And so making sure that we're using all of our resources available, the complex or in the coaching, making sure that once you're identified, you have a support system that you can utilize to help you become more effective rather than just being identified, is a couple of things that we're doing at NTC Hawaii. NTC nationally, districts that we work with nationally, when you're using a comprehensive induction and mentoring program, have a retention rate increase of about 10%. Prior to coming to Hawaii, I worked in Hillsborough County, which were the county that had the Gates Foundation grant of $100 million. And one of the things that we used the money for is including a full release mentor program to support beginning teachers. We went from a retention rate of beginning teachers from about 76% to 94% of our beginning teachers stayed, and that was really due to a lot of the intensive mentoring, where they got a one-on-one mentor once a week for at least 90 minutes a week to not only take the professional development that they were giving with all the new initiatives, Common Core, with your foundational professional development, classroom management, and taking the broad spectrum of professional development, and then working with a mentor to really figure out how to utilize those foundational pieces within the classroom that they actually have and the students that are sitting in front of them day in and day out, so that those students have the best teacher in front of them. And so definitely there was a huge increase in teacher retention. We didn't increase pay. We didn't do anything other really than implementing a comprehensive induction program where beginning teachers had that one-on-one mentoring and the professional development that supplemented it, and we saw that huge increase.
Thanks. Back to cost of living a little bit. It seems tough to me, this is just my perspective, to go to school 4 years, you graduate, you get a job as a teacher, and then the next thing you're looking for 2 roommates to help make ends meet. But the legislature and the senator, of course, is very familiar with this, has a limited pot of money to work with. So if we want to pay teachers more, and I think they could make a very strong case, as Corey has mentioned, for increasing the wages, where does that money come from, though? I mean, does something have to give, or do we raise taxes? I mean, where does it come from? And feel free to, whoever wants to jump in on that.
Raise taxes. My very first year in the Senate, in 2009, Senator Norman Sakamoto was the chair of education, and I was his vice chair. And one of the bills that we co-introduced was a bill to dedicate 1% of the general excise tax to education. Now, whether or not we raise it by 1% or just take 1% of it now is something that we really have to look at, because I have been told when we talk about raising the GET that there are many people who said if it was dedicated for education that they wouldn't, be so against it. But that is something that I'll tell you whenever you talk about raising taxes, I don't see anyone in the room, not teachers, not principals, not administrators, to back us up. So, of course, it never gets passed. If you look at Hawaii, we are the only state in the United States where the state supports the public schools. In every other state, it's the counties. We don't have county taxes. So one of the things that we have to look at is this something that we want to go down this road? Is it worth it for our children to have a dedicated source of education? And I find it hard to figure out how the DOE, no matter who the superintendent is, to have a vision, to have a plan when you don't know where the funding is going to come from. So I think, along the lines, we have to look at the funding source at some time or another. And it's not a popular question to talk about raising taxes, but I believe the GET tax, except for the 0.5% that we give to rail, has not been raised since the late 60s when we had probably half the population that we have now.
Well, Senator Kanani, I love that suggestion. We tried it last year. The big problem, and she mentioned something like this, is that would be a great way of solving the problem. But she also mentioned the problem of who's going to push for it. And that's the problem we have in Hawaii. The most influential people in Hawaii are also the ones that send their kids to private school. Hawaii has the highest rate of private school attendance in the nation. Okay, and it's even worse when you get to Honolulu. And what we've basically done is created two systems in Hawaii. The rich send their kids off to the private schools where they have low class sizes, well-paid teachers, air conditioning. And if you don't have the money, or you can't, bend the dollar as much, your kid goes to those other classrooms. And so who's going to be the one fighting for it? The parents, they get frustrated, they send their kids to private schools. The teachers, they get frustrated, they leave. Okay? And so we've created this void where there is no one left to sit there and fight for it. And you say, well, whenever you mention the word taxes, people say, oh, okay? So if we were able to do that, it would be a great way of doing funding. But the second problem in Hawaii is this. The same people that are negotiating teacher salaries also don't have power over taxation. The Board of Education has no power like in counties and districts on the mainland where they also have the power to tax. So the legislature, when you start negotiating teacher salaries, they're going to say we don't have the money. The legislature doesn't give us enough. If you go to the legislature, they're going to start arguing, well, we don't get involved with contracts. Collective bargaining is left to the board. So the problem that exists is that this two-headed monster creates the problem that we exist right now, that there's no one that can say teachers deserve this salary and we can have the power to raise taxes in order to achieve that.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? Another issue I wanted to delve in that some of you mentioned earlier is just part of retention coming from where teachers come from. We've had to essentially import a lot of our teachers. And I think a lot of that might have to do with our universities not producing enough teachers. So I'm wondering, this is just my thinking, that you're born here, you're raised here, you get a job teaching here, you're more likely to stay here, and you're supported by family and friends. You have that network. Of course, this is true in every profession, basically. I'm wondering, first of all, if my logic makes any sense to you guys, but what do we need to do to grow more of our own teachers? Maybe this is one we can go ahead and run through the panel.
You want to start? You want to go right down?
Let's start next to you this time.
Go ahead, Will.
So Teach for America, I think, has a reputation of having all teachers from the mainland. So I just want to actually just start there. We do have a significant number, but I do want to just start there and say that it's roughly between a third and 45% of our teachers are local teachers who are teaching in public schools. So in recent years. So just want to say that. And there is a difference in retention rate between local teachers and non-local teachers. One of the things, we only have teachers teach in low-income schools that tend to be those schools that are fairly difficult to staff. And I don't want to create a simplistic narrative here. And I want to think about teacher retention, but I also want to think about some other things about the quality of teachers, which is sometimes linked to longevity, but not always linked to longevity. And so we had an African-American teacher teaching in Ka'u, last year. That is not the kind of cultural exchange, an African-American teacher from New York City. That is not the kind of cultural exchange that happens when you have only teachers from Hawaii. So I do think our teachers who are not from Hawaii play a valuable role. That said, when you think about teaching and retention, I do think that we need to create more of a systemic pipeline here. And I think that is about getting people into the profession, although we do a fairly good job getting people into the profession. The challenge is 3, 4, 5 years in, are they feeling like this is a profession they want to choose for more than an idealistic phase in their life and kind of commit to for the rest of their life? And the challenge, I think it's the support during the first couple of years is absolutely crucial. They enter with a lot of idealism, and if they are actually not successful with kids, that idealism goes away pretty quickly, and you begin to feel really demoralized. But then 3, 4, 5 years in, they're thinking about schools. I know I'm changing the topic, but I'll get back to it in just a second.
Please continue.
3, 4, 5 years, they're beginning to think about the change at the school level. And if they're not getting traction and thinking about how schools are becoming better for kids, how schools are becoming better for the adults in the building, and how basically they're becoming really functional places, they get frustrated. So I think that's where I think about the leadership question. And in terms of cultivating local teachers for local schools, I absolutely think we need to do that. One of the challenges is not just the numbers of students, but it's also where they are willing to teach. We have a continued shortage on the neighbor islands, in our most rural communities on Oahu, and in our most rural communities in basically all over Hawaii. And so it's not just enough to encourage people who want to live in Honolulu to teach, because they in many cases are not willing to go out and teach in Waianae Nanakuli. And it's let alone in Hana. And so I think we have to think about that as well, is where is the need for teachers, and can we look at our students as those potential leaders of our communities, and think of a longer term than just let's get a few more people into our program, and think about like how are we cultivating our students in Keau on the Big Island to get those 4-year degrees and come back and become their teachers in their communities.
Have you seen programs like bonuses and things like that to teach in those kind of areas effective?
I'm not the best person to speak about that, because our people, they come in, it's a social justice organization, and they tend to come in with an orientation that I am going to teach where the need is. And so I think that we get people there for passion. Now, whether or not they stay because of bonuses, I think that they can be effective. Again, as a larger question about salaries, I'm not sure anyone chooses to teach in Nanakuli over Waipahu for the bonus alone, but I don't know that to be true.
Sure, thanks.
You mentioned Ka'u and Ke'au several times, and yesterday I spent all day in the district of Pahoa going through to the schools in Ke'au and Ka'u, and they have a hard time recruiting teachers. That's for sure. The areas on the Leeward Coast, the more rural areas, they do have a more difficult time recruiting teachers, and it's difficult for me to understand how you would expect a teacher right out of school to want to serve in these places when, number one, you're not getting paid enough. You're going to be separated from friends and family that you have a long commute, and for all of those who drove out here and don't live here, I hope you enjoyed your hour and 15 minutes on the road. Okay, because for us in Mililani, that's a regular way of life. If you, and we don't have it the worst. If you live in Eva or Kapolei or Waianae, add another half hour to that commute. So those are all part of the things that we have to deal with in trying to recruit teachers. What was that?
The sunset was nice, though.
But you know what I'm saying is that there does have to be more. There has to be something in those teachers that want to go out there and serve. And for Teach for America's, whatever they have, I think they're supplemented a little bit more to get them to go out there. And I believe that the DOE has a similar incentive to do that. But it's not enough to make them stay. And that's part of the culture with these rural schools, is that you have students growing up with, every year they see new teachers coming in. Is this the role model that they feel, oh, this must be a really great profession, because you know they can't keep the teachers? So I think part of it is that in those areas where they need them the most, you probably are less likely to have teachers who are role models that will stay in the community to do that. It was a breath of fresh air because I did see some of those teachers yesterday. I saw a new complex area supervisor, Keone Farias, who took Mary Correa's place, and he is just bursting with energy, and he has so much love for the school. And we talked so much about, you know, what he did to turn around the school. And for him, I think it's a personal interest because he did grow up in the area. Everybody we passed, he knew them by name. He knew the adults. He knew the custodians. He knew children that were in the charter schools we visited. It was just amazing. And those are the kinds of people that you are looking to attract. But we need more in mentoring. He is going to have his hands full as a CAS. Do we have time to free him up so that he could mentor more principals, mentor more teachers? And I think you and I have to sit down and have a great discussion about mentoring. So that's some of the input I'd like to give.
Thanks.
Thank you. So definitely, I think that trying to get people from Hawaii into the teaching profession is a huge effort to put into it, but it's more about once they're there, keeping them. And we've talked about necessarily like thinking about your high poverty areas, and we even talked about at Campbell, I want to say that you guys have over 30 beginning teachers just this year, and in the last 3 years, I think you stated a number of like 97 beginning teachers. And so it goes back to, there was an article written about the greening effect, and really thinking about now the norm is not to have those veteran teachers that have been educators for 15, 20 years. More likely it's that you have educators that are in your school, and the majority of them are in their first or second, third year. And so we definitely don't have time to wait till they get their experience, because we talk about, you know, oh, well, once they have their experiences in, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years, they're gonna be better. But the kids that walk in that classroom on a first-year teacher's day, they're ready to have the best teacher in there right then. And we don't have 3 or 4 years, especially when you're talking about you have so many beginning teachers. There's a possibility that in the first year they have a beginning teacher, and then they go to that second year of schooling, they have a beginning teacher, and they have the third year. And so they've never had those experiences. So I think one of the things that really needs to be focused in on is definitely trying to get the culture up. But definitely once those teachers are there, how do you create a culture, and how do you support those teachers to be as effective as possible, as fast as possible? Because those kids don't have time for you to be effective in 3 years. They need you to be effective now. And one of the things, you know, is definitely about mentoring and coaching, and it's having that very intensive support so that you don't want to leave. And so you're talking about, I'm from the mainland, and talking about it's a different culture in Hawaii. It's a very different culture in Hawaii. And I would have loved being in Hawaii, having a mentor that came in every single week that worked with me, not only on my best practices and my strategies that I'm going to implement, but also the cultures of that community in my school, because that's just as important as some of those best practices.
That's excellent points, thanks.
Two things I want to say. First of all, I don't want to blame Teach for America for the we have. In fact, I think that they're an easy solution that's like a Band-Aid over a larger problem. The problem is that they do constantly leave. I think the turnover rate for Teach for America is 80% after 3 years. And so, again, these schools that they're constantly going to are the highest poverty schools. So, we get some really great teachers from Teach for America, and some of them out of Campbell. I just wish they would stay. And that's our problem, is they have the same problem that we have retaining Teach for America that we do with all of our teachers. I would like one day that Teach for America would die a natural death, that they would not need it anymore. Take, for example, one of the best school systems in the world is Finland. And for their college system, 90% of the people that apply to the College of Education are denied. They get the pick of the litter, and their turnover rate is 1 or 2% a year. Ours is 11. So the best thing to do is take what Teach for America does as well, is they recruit, very well qualified people. But wouldn't it be great if we had well qualified people that wanted to stay in education? We could reform all of this. The second thing about mentoring is, again, we don't want to pay our mentor teachers. They get a few $100s a year. I used to do mentor teaching. And then I realized it became a job every single year. It wasn't like once in a while you get someone and you mentor them and then you're done with it. Because we have 30 teachers turning over, it became this one more unpaid duty on top of everything else we were doing. New York teachers just signed a contract where mentor teachers can get paid up to $20,000 a year for mentoring new teachers. Sign me up. Then I'll be willing to do it. But if it's just this one more thing we're going to do, we can't get enough qualified, experienced teachers that are willing to mentor new teachers because of this problem.
Thanks. Lisa.
Well, again, so I talked to about 10 teachers about this question. And so one of the teachers had this point where he said, rather than the pay, I'm going back to pay, that's what they all talked about, rather than the salary being negotiated, he said there's always kind of a bad feeling left after a negotiation. He would like to see that this is going to be my top salary and I can work toward it. And let's say at a hard-to-staff school, maybe like at the end of 3 years, there's a bonus. At the end of 5 years, there's another salary increase. Because then he said, then I might hang on for that next year, then I might hang on for that next 5 years, knowing that I'm going to get this set pay. And right now, he said they're not quite sure what it is. They're not really sure what the next jump is going to be.
Interesting. Thanks.
Can I just share the actual retention rates for
Yeah,
Teach for
of
America
course.
teachers?
Of course.
I proved that one. I looked it up last night.
So where'd you look it up?
There's national reports on Teach for America, also Linda Darling-Hammond's book, The Flat World in Education. It was multiple sources that said 80% after 3 years.
Okay, so in Hawaii, I don't know the national picture, but in Hawaii we have about through the third year, from starting on day one, we keep more than 2/3 through the third year, and then it does drop off. It is true, but it doesn't drop off 40% in 1 year. And then the other statistic I think is also important is that 2/3 stay in education. So they may not stay in their classroom, but they stay within the education field long term. So I just think that's important. I do think lots of your points were well made, and I appreciate them.
Well, I'll just back him up on that, Will. So I'm at Kailua Intermediate, and we did have a high Title I percentage, so we were able to hire Teach for America teachers, and I hired two. One is still at our school. Her boyfriend came over. They're in their third year, so it was a twofer, and they're both fabulous teachers, care about young people, and everyone's talking to them about, hey, 1.1 million people do live in Hawaii, so you can stay here too. So they're strongly considering staying, but they are worried about just how to make it work, and they want to have a family.
Sure. Thanks. Some of the money stuff aside, I recall when I lived on Kauai, talking to teachers, one of the issues, again, money aside, was administrative, bureaucratic. There were a couple of the teachers in particular in Hanalei were, the DOE just keeps trying a new program. It doesn't work out so well. They scrap it. Let's try another one. They scrap it. And they were just fed up, and they're like, we're out of here. I was wondering if you guys could comment about that. Like, how much of an issue is the bureaucracy or administrative side of things in terms of teacher retention?
I'll start.
Let's start with you. You're on a roll.
I think education nationally, there tends to be that trend where there's a high turnover before a program can be implemented with fidelity and then sustained, and then to get good data a lot of times, whole language and phonics, that kind of just going back and forth on that pendulum. Neither side really sticks, and really probably the best solution is something that's a little more integrated. There's always this pendulum going back and forth, and you'll see that in research, and really not a lot of good research in education in general that's really been vetted and meets these rigorous standards.
I think a lot, kind of what's behind your question is about the EES. So I'll talk a little bit about that, which is
the latest, yeah.
the educator effectiveness system. And I actually think that this is one of those things that we need to keep. And I know that not everyone on this panel probably agrees with me, but it's a professional evaluation for teachers. And what I like about it is that's multiple data points. I think it should be formative primarily, so helping teachers to improve. But without data, you don't actually know how your students are performing, how you're doing. Without good observation data from a strong principal, stops principals from just being the kind of executive in charge of a building plant to start being the instructional leaders of a school. So I think that is one of the innovations that I think is really important and I think should stay. The lift last year was huge. So principals and teachers had a lot to do, and I think that we need to do a lot more to support people to do that, which is, I think, and I think there are lots of other examples within the department of things that were around for a year, 2 years, and then tossed out. And so that larger point is well taken. I would just hate to throw out the educator effectiveness system as just another bureaucratic innovation, when I actually think that is at the core of what we can use to improve our schools.
I want this one. Okay. EES is horrible. I'm going to speak as a parent first. When you test 2 subjects, teachers teach 2 subjects. My daughter got reading in the morning, math in the afternoon. Forget science, forget social studies, art, music. You know what Punoho doesn't have? Standardized testing. Finland doesn't have standardized testing. They want to develop the whole child. EES at times is a horse and pony show for teachers. Standardized testing only shows us which kids come from high socioeconomic areas and punishes teachers that teach in low socioeconomic teachers, which actually pushes teachers away from dealing with hard to deal with school districts or hard to deal with schools and pushes them to richer schools. 98% of teachers were rated effective or highly effective, yet the stress that EES is causing is pushing good teachers out. Because one of the biggest stressors is being held accountable for something that you have no control over. If a student doesn't show up for class, that doesn't make me a bad teacher. 90% of teachers that were surveyed said that EES is not helping them to improve to be a good teacher. If I'm going to be observed, I'm going to put on a good show for the principal. But what I really should be doing is pick a lesson where I may not be strong, where someone can come and observe my classroom and help me to improve. But if I'm going to be judged, I'm going to change it entirely. So when we talk about things like EES or standardized testing, the reason why we do often these things, and teachers call them the new flavors of the month, because we don't want to deal with the fundamentals such as teacher pay or air conditioning and things. We try to find the newest gimmick that's cheaper than dealing with the large-scale issues. So we constantly try to find whether it's teacher evaluations or more testing or whatever the program is, because that's a lot cheaper than dealing with what's really causing these problems.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
So if we're not talking about the teacher salaries, then we should be talking about the increasing demands of our teachers. What I get from teachers is that they keep piling it on their plates, but nothing comes off. Whether it's Common Core, No Child Left Behind, Felix Consent Decree, every new thing that comes around, there are different things the teachers need to do. They feel that they're just overwhelmed. They have to incorporate new things into the curriculum with little or no training and little or no mentoring. So I think the frustration shows for a lot of the teachers. And I know, Corey, you talked about Finland, but just to be fair, let's talk apples and apples, because Finland, I'm sure, doesn't deal with No Child Left Behind or Felix Consent Decree. We react to lawsuits by far better than we react to trying to make teachers happy. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And I don't know how we change that. I can hear the frustration of teachers, and when I talk to them, I feel so badly because they're good people. I feel they're good teachers. They want to do the best, but they don't feel that they are getting the support of whether it's the system, the DOE, whether it's their principals who are more accountable to the CASs and the higher-ups. But I don't know what the answer is. Again, your suggestions would be appreciated. I will give you all of you my email, and I'd like you guys to email. I also know that during session, and this is not the fault of teachers or principals, they're all in their schools doing what they need to do, but we get very little feedback and input. I will be honest with you there. So I don't expect you guys to be up on all the bills, because God knows I'm not even up on all the bills. But don't just let it go. If you hear of something, send us an email, ask us, or give us a comment. But I know the frustration of the teachers. I talked to many. I had one working on my staff for a while, and a good teacher, but just very, very skeptic of all the new things that they're expected to learn with not much time to do it in.
All right, going last kind of sucks because you have to tie it all together, right? So I'm going to try to go back to the original question, but then also tie in EES. So really thinking about, I want to say the original question had something to do with, Nathan, can you read it to me one more time?
It had more to do with our teachers leaving because of administrative things, bureaucratic hurdles, like.
Gotcha. Okay, so really going back to some of the research of teachers, and you brought this point up earlier, is that teachers, some schools get incentives to go and work at them, and so that a lot of times will bring teachers to them because you get $3,000 extra a year. What research shows, though, is over the long term, teachers aren't staying there. And the reason that they're not staying there is that $3,000 isn't enough when it's not a culture that is supportive, and it's not a culture that's aligned with really teacher development and making sure that they have the resources to really work with the students in that school. And so I think that really, it goes back to, and I brought it up 3 different times, so I'm going to bring it up a 4th time, is really that culture and that support that an administrator can create within a school. And if you've ever walked into a school that has that, it doesn't matter if it's high poverty school or if it's really a high SES school. It's apparent when you walk in. It's very apparent with the teachers and what they're aligned to, and there's a goal. Going to EES, regardless of what your feeling is on EES, and there are 2 very different thought processes up here on the panel, and I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Being a teacher, I'm not necessarily opposed to having to be held accountable. However, what I also hear you saying is that you would like, and you said it specifically, you would like some non-evaluative feedback throughout the year that's formative. And so rather if it's mentoring a 1st and 2nd year where they get it every single week, or putting in a coaching support system where veteran teachers have the opportunity to have some coaching and some feedback, so that it's not necessarily where you're rated, but you're really just getting the opportunity to see what practices are successful with the students that you're working with every day, and what practices might be tweaked in a very safe environment could be an opportunity that Hawaii has to really put into place.
I agree, by the way.
Did I cover all aspects?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
well done, well done. I wanted to run through, what's that? Go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
Just one more comment, and this touches upon what Corey said earlier about standardized testing. And I think more problematic in schools where you have a lot of homeless and a lot of English English learners. When you do the testing, the teachers in some of those tests are not allowed to explain the question. They can't translate it, they can't do anything. It's, here's your test, and you do it. If they don't understand English, they can't read English, they're going to have a problem. If they've not eaten, and they were up late at night because whatever fight was going on in the next tent, they're not going to be able to take the test. So I can see where, especially in those rural areas, you're going to have a harder time getting teachers, because if they feel that they're accountable and they are working with a group of students where you have a high percentage of homeless and you have a high percentage of English learners, then those tests are always going to put you, further behind, and you're accountable for that. Yet you're not accountable, So I understand what you're saying, and I get you on that. Again, I don't know what the resolution is, but I wanted to take a minute to introduce Senator Donovan Dela Cruz that walked in a little while ago. He's also going to be a member of the Education Committee, Senate Education Committee this session. Thank you.
Thanks.
Incidentally, the tests aren't in Hawaiian either. So if you think about immersion schools that are teaching primarily in Hawaiian, the tests don't align to that language of instruction.
Interesting. I wanted to run through another question or two and then open it up to members of the audience if you guys have any questions. This one comes from a reader, and I'm curious, not just inside the school hurdles that we've talked about, whether it's the DOE or the support there, but what about outside support for teachers and keeping them here? Is the community doing enough? Are parents doing enough?
I could try that one.
Go ahead.
When I meet new teachers at our school, in fact, I just met one today, I always tell them to let me know what your needs are, and there are really no limits to resources. There really aren't. I mean, you've got a gentleman right here, a couple right here, that if I need something, I can call the Chamberlains and they might help me out. But in Kailua, and I really think when I worked in Waianae and Nanakuli, there's just a wealth of support, and it's really knowing what you need and asking for it, and then sharing the results. And we've done that over and over again. So there are really no limits to needs, and it's just about reaching out and doing good work, and really the universe gets behind you every single time. So yeah, I don't know about the salary part, but as far as when teachers are doing good work, there are websites right now. One of our teachers just requested 4 laptops and 4 notebooks, and she got them just by putting it up on a website.
We have a program for many of our first and second year teachers called Hanai a Teacher, which is when community members can Hanai a teacher, often a teacher not from here, but sometimes also from here. And I think that the more that the teachers are integrated into the community, and many teachers, even if they're local, are not teaching in their community of origin. And so thinking about like, how are we as schools, as professional development organizations building that connection to the community? I think that the many points of connection, the more likely people are to stay in that classroom and in that community. So I don't have a pat answer for how parents, I'm a parent, so if someone wants to tell me how I should support the teachers, let me know, but I do know that it's important.
Yeah, anyone else want to weigh in on that? Senator?
I know of, as a senator, I go to a lot of the schools. I have contacts with different unions and organizations who are willing to give physical things to schools and their needs. But I think a lot of the things that I'm hearing from teachers, that it's resources that they feel are in the way of mentoring and support from whether it's the principal or the CAS or whatever. And I don't know that they feel that there's a group in the community that they can pick their brain on when it's not really physical needs that they're looking at. And maybe this is something that we can work on finding a group like that for every community.
Sure. Any other comments on that from you guys? If not, here's a question from Twitter. You guys might want to weigh in. How can we help teachers share their successes and have platforms for affirmation? Anyone? Anyone?
Oh, I'll try.
Sure.
So I got to meet with some teachers of the year from different states, and they're getting together to really promote teacher voice and to inform practice, including at the legislatures in the communities in which they teach. And they're lobbying, because you said you had a teacher on one of your boards, they're trying to do something similar where they can inform the public and inform legislation. And so I really think there are avenues, and they might be untapped in Hawaii, but to develop teacher voice.
The best professional development for a teacher is to go see other teachers teaching and have the reverse true. And so I don't know, and I think that is validating and celebrating. Another teacher giving you a compliment when I was a teacher was the best thing ever. It was more important than getting one from my administrator. And so the more that we can do that, that might be more informal. It's not big and sexy and, you know, people on billboards. But I do think that within a school, getting your recognition of your peers is actually very important.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you guys is, I mean, what kind of things, we've talked a lot about the hurdles and issues and problems with retention, but what kind of programs or things are you seeing that are working that we should really make sure that we hold on to and don't mess up? Let's start down with Corey.
Yeah, that was a hard one I was just thinking about. You know, I ran into someone recently and they asked, well, how are teachers feeling? And I said, it's the lowest I've ever seen in my career. So when you ask that question, what's working well? Right now, I just see so many problems. And it's amazing. We have some amazing teachers at our schools. And they stay at those schools despite the odds. Recently I had a chance to visit Punahou. And I saw some great teachers there. But what I also recognized is that we had just as good or even better teachers at my own school. And I would love to just be able to keep these teachers. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing the game of Survivor. I'm going to be the last one at the island. You know, the last teacher at Campbell left after 5 years. And so I think one of the greatest things that we can do at the end is keep these great teachers, you know, reduce this level of loss so that we don't need to have more and more, and it becomes a very selective field. And then what I think happens is that we change the environment of where you feel like you're the last one there to feel like you're part of this team that's staying, and then you start thinking about long-term how we can fix the school, rather than just who do we lose this year.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm obviously going to say mentoring is definitely going to, you know, be something that is a program that works. You know, we have data we do every year, a yearly, and it's a perceptional survey, but every year we do a survey out to beginning teachers and their mentors. And the results from last year's survey, 91% of the beginning teachers that did the survey said that their mentor helped them become a more effective teacher. So that's huge in its perception, but perception becomes reality when you're trying to stay into a profession and want to be there. The other thing that I think is super important is just making sure that they feel supported, and so I think that that's one of the biggest things that we're doing when we're mentoring. You've talked about, you know, there are all these initiatives, and so just making sure that there's somebody there to help them build their resiliency, because again, going back to teaching's hard, and I had the opportunity to work with beginning teachers this year, and it was interesting. It was 2 days before school started. The week before school started, we did a beginning teacher summer academy, and so their mind is all on setting up their classroom and, you know, their curriculum and this, that, and the other thing. And at the end of it, when we asked them, you know, what their feeling was, they asked me, could we have more of these? They didn't get paid. It was right before school started. And so just really providing them that support, I think, we overlook that sometimes, and I think that that's just really important to make sure that we're providing those things to our beginning teachers.
Thanks. Senator?
I think, sometimes we forget that our teachers are human. They're parents, they're grandparents, they're brothers, sisters, their daughters and sons. They have personal lives. And sometimes when you're feeling overwhelmed with things that are just happening all around you, whether it's at school, at home, or whatever, it's really hard to be the role model you need to be for the students in your class. And I think just having someone to talk to, or if you know that someone in your school is going through hardships, to have other teachers aware, to just check in on them and say, how are you doing today? Anything I can help you with? Those things maybe don't happen as much as we need them to happen. And I think going back to providing the mentorship goes a long way for the teachers. And I think we are on the right track when we talk about being mentors. But again, we need to look at how we are going to fund them and to put them in the schools, and not something that we're going to take away next year because we don't have the funding. So if it's something that we're going to do, we have to find the way to do it.
Thanks.
A few things. There are some new organizations in Hawaii that I think are notable. Emerging Leaders Program has been here for a couple of years, I'm not sure, but they've been training teacher leaders to become stronger data coaches, stronger data in their own classroom, but also outside. I think Ka'i, which is Mililani's summer program, and Pueo, which is Punaho's, do a great job providing leadership opportunities for teachers who kind of can do that during the summer. Hope Street is a teacher voice, building teacher voice and helping teachers to they're beginning to think about how they can play out. And I guess I'm encouraged to think about the teachers because I think induction is absolutely crucial for teachers in their first and second years. It's that kind of gap between third and sixth year that I think is missing, and I think some of those organizations are starting to fill it. The most exciting thing, though, is that I think the Department of Education knows that there's a problem. And I think that they're starting to rethink their leadership pipeline, how they are thinking about how teachers can become leaders. Also think about how they can access other avenues within the education sector.
Thanks, Will.
Well, I just thought of a program at our own school, so going out from outside, just coming in locally. So rather than when I got to our school, I've been a principal at Kailua Intermediate for 3 years. So rather than coming in with big ideas, I really just tried to see what was there, what were the strengths and the interests, what were the needs. So I asked teachers, what are you proud of? And then what keeps you up at night? So they were proud of some programs that they'd implemented. So I wanted to make sure to honor and continue those programs and support them. The concern they had was that in every classroom there were 1 or 2 students who misbehaved and really made the learning experience untenable for the teacher and the other students. So what we did is we put a program in place called the Solution Centers. This is our program. And so we have a teacher who works with students. He keeps explicit data on where the problems are on campus, and we look at the patterns constantly and try to solve them from a systemic level. And so we're at a point where we don't have classroom disruptions. It's a calm campus. There's a positive culture, and we're really working on. And we went from having 3 security guards. We have 1 now, 1 full-time security guard. So it's really about. And then now we talk about college. So our students were implementing AVID strategies, and that also came from the teachers. So I really think that teachers have good ideas, they have strengths and interests, and it's important to build on them and really listen to teacher voice. And we do the same thing with students. We talk to students a lot and get ideas from them rather than always trying to be directive.
Thanks. If you guys aren't opposed, I think now is as good a time as any to open it up to questions from you folks. Mike will set up a mic down here in front, and we can go ahead and I guess just line up, you Mike, you think?
Takers?
Anyone want to be first? All right, come on up.
So we can get it on camera.
Hi. I'm not shy, So. My name is Midori. I'm a student at the university in pre-engineering. I actually grew up in Eva Beach. Went to Campbell High School at its worst. We used to have like fights, like kids stabbing each other. We used to have the police there all the time, and helicopters, the whole 9 yards, like Freedom Riders, but in Eva. Yeah, like the movie. But anyway, my question is, so it seems like, I know the teachers don't want to stay at those, like, I had a lot of TFA teachers who were really cool and really nice, that came from like really good schools. Is it like a thing with TFA? Is only Yale and Harvard teachers only? You know, is that like a thing? I don't know. I had a lot of really cool teachers from TFA, but they didn't stay, and I think it's because of the whole support thing with mentorship. I think that's awesome. But how about I was wondering if we could work on something that could empower the communities first, because sometimes I feel like I grew up and I was there, and I was in a foster home, and I went to a lot of foster homes. I didn't go to school a lot because I was in the foster care system at the time. You go to different houses, so you don't stay in the same classes in the same time. I had to repeat 7th grade 3 times because I just went to like different homes so much, because each home was kind of bad. But yeah, anyway, so I think it'd be cool if we can empower the communities first, because like angry kids don't want to learn. I was a really angry kid, and I didn't give a crap about learning. I went to school because it wasn't home. I went to school I went to Campbell because it wasn't home, and Campbell sucked. Campbell was lame. Like, you don't go, like, no one went to school. It was just a thing. No one went to school because it just sucked, because we all like had abusive parents, or were all foster kids, or didn't like being at home. Like, school was a heaven. So I think if we could reach out to the communities first, it would be really, really nice, because it'd make learning like something that we'd want to do, instead of just being there because we can find a place to sleep or just a place to be safe at.
Did you say you're in college right now?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that you just shared a really powerful story, and I'm really proud of you that you're in college right now.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to answer that question a couple things. First of all, I want to say the problem you talked about was the fights, and this is another thing that was not mentioned. It's like Campbell's growing by 100 students a year, but we're not building any new high schools. I mean, we're literally pouring out the seams there. We're just throwing in portables. Teachers are having to teach in 4 different classrooms, you know, moving all the time, and so we don't look at that problem. But you're right about a big thing, is that we oftentimes say to our schools, solve our social problems. And as more students are having more problems, teachers don't have oftentimes the resources to go, well, this student needs some help. They maybe need a social worker, or they need a drug counselor. And there's oftentimes not enough programs for those things. And so what happens then is there's not a year that goes by where you deal with the most unbelievable home situations as a teacher. And the teacher becomes more than just an educator, they become the counselor. And some of those stories are just, I mean, literally horrible every single year. And it would be nice sometimes, you know, that is an added stress. And so it would be nice sometimes if we could get help for those things as well.
Can I just ask, what was the turning point for you?
Like, what made me want to go to school? I don't know.
And
think about it,
and maybe just, stop being angry if you did, you know.
Yeah, I was like super angry.
I mean, look at you now, and you're a beautiful person, and congratulations for being in college. But something happened, you know, from 7th grade to getting to college. Like, is there something you can credit?
I ran away from my foster home. I ran away, and I was like, I don't care about this. And then I signed out of school because my guardian didn't care. So I just like, can you sign the form? Because at 17, I don't know how it is now, but at the time at 17, you can sign out of school. And I got my GED at the Waipahu Community School for adults. So I only went to a month of my sophomore year. And only because that's how long the process took to sign me out. I just like left my foster home because it just sucked.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
Okay, Midori, right? Is
Yeah,
that your name?
yes.
Okay. So first and foremost, I'm a teacher. I was a teacher first, and I'll always be a teacher. You probably would have been one of my favorite kids because as a teacher, I didn't ever do it for the money. The only reason I was a teacher is to help students become the best people they could possibly be. And so you would have been my challenge. And every day that you showed up.
That was horrible, though.
It's okay. It's okay.
That was really
But
bad.
still, like, it's the challenge, right? You would have been my favorite, right?
I was
It's a
horrible.
challenge. And the fact of what you said, I think, spoke volumes that you probably didn't even realize, is you still went to school because that was your safe place. And one of the hardest things for a teacher is to not have control of the things that happen outside of school. And we don't have that. A lot of times we can tap into support, we don't have that. But as a teacher, I knew that I got you for 7 hours or whatever you were, and I could do the best I could do and make you as safe as possible within those 7 hours. And so when I became a mentor, part of it, and you said, oh, that's really cool, so yay, I got the really cool job, right? Because, and it really is the really cool job because I had that passion and it didn't matter how much you paid me. My hope and dream is that I get to share that with people that want to do the exact same thing. So when students like you come in, you're their challenge and you become their favorite so that you have a place that you can go and feel safe. So yeah.
I don't know if I would have been your favorite.
You would have, I promise.
My mentor is probably the VP because I hung out with her a lot. And then I started working at the middle school that I failed 7th grade at, and then she was like, "You're so different." I'm so glad you're different. I'm sorry. I guess what my question really was can we make education more human? Because at school, in some of my classes at school, one class we pray. We sit in a circle in the very beginning of class, and you actually show up to class 15 minutes before the class actually starts. And not because you have to, but because it kind of like socially guilts you into it at first, and then you like it after. But the teacher asks, is there anything that anyone wants to pray about? Or if anyone has a hard time, is there anyone that we should pray for? Any problems that we should honor or something? And we just sit there and we pray for about whoever someone speaks up about something. And it makes the relationship with your educator more human, and it makes it more meaningful. And I know that we talk about the cost of living and the drive in Eva Beach and Pearl City and stuff, but I find that there's a saying from the Kapuna, and it's that, like, if you want something, it's not hard. And I feel like if there was more of a human relationship with your teacher, your educator, mentor, then it wouldn't be work to drive to work. And I live in Ka'ava, and I drove here tonight to come and talk, or listen to you guys. And I live pretty far away.
Can I just share a response to that? And one of the things that part of a national reform effort is thinking about smaller schools. When you go to Campbell, it's a small city. And Waipahu is the same way, and a lot of our high schools, and kids are having a lot of challenges in 9th, 10th, 11th grade. And that's the moment when many of them choose to drop out of school. And if they're in a community where there's, it's not the only factor, but if they don't know the people around them, the students, the teachers, and the same is true for teachers, I think. If teachers are part of a more intimate community, it can be a powerful thing.
Try to add something quickly here, too. And one of the things you mentioned is that one-to-one relationship. And one of the things that, other than having a quality teacher in the classroom, one of the biggest things we can do is have low teacher-to-student ratios. True. And one of the things that we're doing is we're going the opposite direction in Hawaii. At Campbell, it is, seriously, I've had 2 classes last year. One was 40, and the other one was 41. And it's hard to sometimes have that one-to-one relationship with students when they're just a number. And yes, Campbell has as many people at our school as that live on the island of Lanai.
Well, I could say something. I'll just say one more thing. But there are ways to make big schools small. At our school, we have 700 students, but we have teams. I know Campbell had the 9th grade academy, but so the teachers are on teams and students are on teams, so the teachers can support each other and share the workload. And then students are known well. And then we also use data to just really look at how students are doing and try to be proactive and help them so that they can be successful.
Thanks. Thank you again for taking the drive out here and your question. We'll go next to you.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for your question, and it's one of the things that I deal with a lot. I'm a teacher at Campbell High School, work a lot with Corey causing trouble. One of the things that drives me the most crazy is that I don't have enough time for one-to-one relationships with my students. My students are the most important thing to me, and being able to sit down and counsel them and connect with them, especially those students that do have things going on at home, the ability to relate to them on a interpersonal level and really make them interested in coming to my class is something that's kind of been driven out because I just don't have the time or bandwidth for it because of all the other responsibilities that are added on to me. And a lot of teachers feel that way about a lot of the different programs and the vision that they have for their school. And a lot of teachers have really fantastic vision for the programs and for the things and the activities that they want to see in their school, but they just don't have the bandwidth in order to be able to implement it. They don't have the time, there's not the structure, and even the way that the teaching profession is structured right now kind of disempowers teachers from true leadership within their schools. So like Will mentioned the Hope Street group and some of the teacher leadership programs around. And those are fantastic, but those need to be integrated inside of the teaching profession. Those need to be part of the DOE. They need to be part of the teacher life within the schools, not something extra that they have to reach out and do. And even within the schools, so a lot of the teachers, they leave because they're frustrated that they can't implement the types of change that they want to be able to implement. And we're constantly told as teachers that if you want to be a school leader, you've got to quit teaching. Teachers aren't school leaders. School leaders are school leaders, and teachers are teachers. So if you want to be a real leader, you have to stop teaching and move into school leadership, or you have to move into somewhere else. And that hits on one of the points that Will mentioned on why TFA teachers leave. They may stay in education, but they leave teaching. And they stay in education because they care about education, but they leave teaching because they can't be real school leaders in teaching, and they are ambitious people. So as we look at teaching, we've got to rethink the profession about how teachers can be real leaders with real power and lead their schools. So my question to you is, when you think about redefining the teaching profession to have real results and real teacher leadership within our schools and within our district, what does that look like? What is the mechanism for that? And where are they leaders?
Great question. Anyone want to jump in first?
I'll take it.
Go for it.
You know, the United States, contrary to belief, the teachers have the highest amount of instructional hours in the day in the entire modern world comparison. We don't give enough time for teachers to talk during the day. From 8 to 3, we don't get a minute off. It's constantly going, whether teaching or going to meetings. And so we never get a time just to sit and chat. And going back to this one, teachers would be liberated if EES was off their backs. If they no longer had to worry about tests and they could work together to decide what kind of curriculum was best for their school, instead of being told top down what they should be doing, this would allow a lot of time for conversations of what they could do for their own individual schools. You know, recently we even were forced with the certain bell schedules, being told what to do. And so in this way, oftentimes the schools don't have that own leadership to decide what curriculum they're going to teach, what their bell schedule should be. You know, time to even have these conversations would be a good place to start.
I really agree with the need for more planning time for teachers. If I think about, you know, if many teachers are teaching 3 different curriculums and with very little break in between, and without the need, you know, if you really want to plan a really rich learning experience for kids, it takes time to plan it. And so I would really agree with him about the need for planning time during the day and time to have planning collaboration time.
I think too that goes to part of the issue regarding the act that we recently passed to do with the bell schedules, and I have principals and I have teachers who tell me, more face-to-face time isn't really going to do all that much. What they feel would be the more planning time, the smaller classroom, so that they have time to do the interaction with the teachers, like with their students, like this teacher said. And I do believe that we need to get to that place where we have more time for the planning. I know that you guys, it's a negotiated issue, and I know that you have, I don't know, is it 30 minutes a day? But 45, but if you want to have a teacher coordinated meeting with all of you getting together to, whether it's your grade level or whatever, that's separate. You have to either find time in your planning to do that. So I realize that that's important. I understand the elementary school teachers don't even have that planning time at all. So again, I'm not sure how to get there, but I do hear you guys, and that was one of the things that the teachers talked to me most about, besides the issue of salaries. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So I agree with all of that. And with the teachers that I talked to, second to salary was planning time. And when I got to hear the National Teacher of the Year speak, he did the math. So he said they get about an hour of planning time a day. And if you have 120 students, which is generous, I mean, that's about a half a minute a student, right? And parents want high touch. They've got IEPs, they have 504 conferences, they want to do collaboration, they want to plan their lessons. We really emphasize writing probably across the state, and so that's a lot of reading and commenting. So it's just, that's really something that our teachers want. And so rather than extending the day, and we're hoping that the minimum minutes gets repealed, that law, but rather than extending the day, really quality time is what we hope to have.
As the son of two lifelong public school educators, I remember a lot of the planning time happened at home on the couch. Anyone else have a question? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Isaiah. I actually work here at Kipapa Elementary. It's my third year teaching. And I am a TFA alum as well. I grew up in Mililani and came back to Mililani to teach, so I'm one of those Kama Aina that came back. So one of the things that, a recurring theme that I especially heard about new teacher mentorship was about school culture, and about how like strong school cultures help retain teachers. And I think from my own personal experience, Kipapa Elementary has a really strong culture in making you feel like you belong here. So I definitely think that that's a huge factor in it. But at the same flip of the coin, like even as somebody who works at a school who feels like classroom culture is really strong, who's responsible? Like, part of my question is, whose responsibility is that to manifest that school culture for schools that may not have a culture like that? And to, like, even at a school where I feel as though this culture is very strong, just this week, in the past 2 days we've been back in session, I had 2 teachers come up to me and ask me, what am I doing next year? Am I staying? Because that's the hot topic for new teachers. And I go through the list of like, oh, I'm considering staying, like I really like my school. And then we have some conversation back and forth, and then the conversation always goes back to, hey, you're really talented, like I've been here for 25 years, don't do this. So like, where is this, like, when we're trying to build great school culture, what responsibility, like I guess, veteran teachers have in this role where these people that I look up to as mentors who I've learned a lot from already are also telling me like, learn from me in this fact, don't stay in teaching. And yeah, so that's what.
I mean, I think it's easy to put blame on that advice, but what is the culture that is producing that? And I think that's the larger question. And and sometimes, so I don't have the answer, but I do think, how are we valuing people who stay? How are we providing moments of celebration? And how are we grounding? I mean, I actually do think that the celebration should not be about them staying. It should be about them leading students to real change in their lives academically and personally. But I do think there is a question of how are we valuing teachers, and how are we valuing beginning teachers by giving them the support that they need, mid-level teachers by giving them opportunities to develop their voice, lead, and veteran teachers to value their presence in a school and their commitment to a school.
So I feel like that question was directed at me, so I'll take it. And two things, like I wish that there was a magic answer for everything in education, but everyone in this room has their heart in education in some way, shape, or form. And education is different from student to student, from site to site, from complex area to complex area. So two things that I'm gonna say about that. I think that administrators also need to be supported. I've talked a lot about supporting beginning teachers or just teachers in general. I think that administrators also need to be supported. We do, for New Teacher Center, we actually work with principals in their first and second year as well here to help support them. We've also this year taken on working with 4 different complex area superintendents, really to try to work that, because it's not just a one-way street. It really needs to all come together to create a package. So I hear you, and definitely there are things in the work there, because it can't just be a one-way street. And to create the environment you've talked about, it just doesn't happen naturally. It doesn't happen naturally in a teacher's classroom. It's not going to happen naturally in a site. And so we definitely need to support and mentor administrators. So I hear that and know that, like the New Teacher Center, it's funny because I talk to my colleagues and the ones that support administrators, they struggle with the name New Teacher Center because it obviously talks about new teachers, but we're really talking about just education in general and mentoring and coaching. The second piece I heard you say is questioning about staying in your role. And so never, because I don't know if your principal is in here, would I say, oh yeah, I think you should go and move on. I think that you need to think about where your passion is, and just because you would leave, like when I became a mentor in Hillsborough County, I left teaching, and that was the biggest struggle for me, is I left my classroom. Of the 30 kids every day that came into my classroom, I was an elementary school teacher. What I also recognize, though, is being a full release mentor. I worked with 15, and most of the time 15 was our cap, so most of the time it was 21, because same things happen in education. So it was like 21 beginning teachers, and what I saw, I was really nervous about it. What I saw, though, is being a mentor. It's a leadership opportunity, which we were asking about, what do teachers do for leadership if they don't want to go into administration? It was a leadership opportunity where I became like, I always referred to it as, I got to be the grandmother, because I got to go in and work with kids on a daily basis and support beginning teachers. And you better believe that I was just as proud of my beginning teachers when they had those successes and we could celebrate those successes as I did when I was in the classroom and I saw those successes in students. But then it was almost twofold, because now I had 15 beginning teachers, and then I also had their 30 kids. So then I wasn't a math teacher, I was a reading teacher, but do the math. It's a lot of people, right, that I touched. And so even if you decided to do something, I would encourage you not to leave education, but definitely, you know, even moving up a little bit, you still get those touches, and just being as passionate as possible, and like from how you spoke and how articulate you are and how passionate you are, you know, I think even just moving, if you went somewhere else, you know, as long as you really always come back to, it's about the kids that are sitting in those classrooms and making sure that they have the best person in front of them every day. If it means that you're one step away, but you're doing it for 500 kids instead of the 30 kids, you know, I still think that we need those people as well.
Thanks. If I can just interrupt real quick, I want to have Mike wrap up our Alelo broadcast, then we can go back offline and finish answering some of the Q&As.
Well, everybody, thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate the support from Mililani and the community to come support a discussion like this. I also want to thank each of the panelists, Corey, Michelle, Senator, Will, and Lisa for joining us. Also, I have to thank our sponsors, particularly Alelo, for broadcasting this and sharing it with the entire community. We really appreciate the support that they've offered these discussions and some of the events that will be put together. And then lastly, I want to thank our sponsors, the Community Coalition, the UH College of Education, and the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. So thank you, everybody. If you're here, we're going to take some more questions after the cameras are off. So thanks again, and we will see you next time.